We are going to begin our school district budget hearing. Joining us today, Councilor Hogan, Caldwell, Gathers, Monto, President Hudson, Green, Allen, and Schultz. Thank you for joining us, and school board, some members are here, and Syracuse staff and Syracuse City School District staff as well. So welcome everybody. Tony, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you all for allowing us to be here today. We wanted to go through the budget with you. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Pachenko in just a moment. I just wanted to start out by saying that we understand the value of the relationships that we have with the city, and we do appreciate that. The budget process is just the budget process. So we will present to you what we are asking for and what we're trying to do in the process of the year. And then we'll go through details as far as whatever questions you might have, we'll be willing to answer as you find fit. Okay.
Thank you.
Chief Pachenko.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Pachenko. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Syracuse City School District, and along with Superintendent Davis, I thank you for this opportunity to present to you the board-approved 23-24 adopted budget. This adopted budget is based upon Governor Hochul's executive state aid, and it's still pending legislative approval. Currently, there are no anticipated changes in education funding so far from what we hear. So we're presenting this budget with that in mind. Once the state budget
Can I stop you 1 minute? Can you pull the mic more in front of you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Once the state budget is passed, we'll have more concrete details, but again, this is based upon the information that we have at this time. In front of you, you have a PowerPoint, and I'll just walk you through it. On the second page is the agenda for what we want to discuss with you this afternoon. The first thing we did was we engaged community stakeholders in the development of this balanced budget, ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our community. Then we will provide an overview of our projected state aid, assuming that our education funding will not change. Then we're going to walk through some of the assumptions for revenue and expenses and highlight some of those changes for the current year. And then we'll give you an overview of our adopted 23-24 school year budget. Next page, the first thing we did was we engaged the students and the community in the development of our budget. The school district feels it's very important to engage parents and stakeholders in our budget planning process. We did simulations with the superintendent's parent council and the student council. We sent out postcards to all of our families. In those postcards, we gave them an opportunity to go online and do the balancing act simulation. This provides them with an opportunity to have some feedback and some information on where do they feel our resources should be allocated, and provide us any feedback and any of their thoughts. In these meetings with our community stakeholders, the overall three themes were they want us to increase funding to pay higher pay for student-facing staff, administrators working within the school buildings, more programs for students, more mental health support for students. They also felt that we should decrease funding for charter schools and a reduction of non-critical staff. Within this, breaking it down even further, they suggested that we do additional math and reading supports, additional mental health supports, and improve and enhance our student attendance initiatives. We took all these in consideration, and all of these initiatives are built into our budget for this coming school year.
What was the participation rate?
380.
We had 380 page views that went through this simulation.
So out of the 22,000 students in the
19,000. Yes.
It was only 380
yes,
families that participated.
Yep, at the time of putting this budget together. But we also had feedback from parents and other areas too, through the parent council and through the student council. Just an overview of where we are with funding from the state level. This state budget now is extended until Friday, April 28th. Most of the discussions are around bail reform and not education, so we feel comfortable with where our projections are on our education funding. Overall, there's an increase in the executive budget of $3.1 billion in education funding. The Regent's proposal requested categorical aid increases, which are not included in the executive budget. When you look at that $3.1 billion increase, $2.7 billion was set aside to fully fund the state aid formula. As you know, over a number of years, there's been discussions about school districts not being equitably funded by the state. This is the year where the state has finally made up that difference and brought forth additional funding. And then there's also expense-driven aids that make up the other $400 million. That is to fully fund building aid, transportation aid, BOCES, and special needs aids. So that's where the $3.1 billion is going at the state level. If you look deeper into the state budget, the highlights of the current legislative proposal, about 27% of the total state budget is allocated toward education. As I mentioned, $3.1 billion, or 9.9% of the current increase is increased up for the state aid, and then that's the $2.7 billion for the foundation aid, again, increasing it. Once the foundation aid is fully funded after this coming year, any increases that the school district will receive will be based upon the CPI index. So we know that we're not going to receive a lump sum and we're going to be fully funded moving forward. It's just going to be consumer price indexed increases to the school district. The other thing going forward that you might want to keep in mind is that the foundation aid formula is something that the state is going to be looking at. They're going to have discussions about how the averages are weighted and how they can revise that formula. So our hope is that school districts in the Big Five in particular, who have a large number of special education students, E&L students, poverty index, those things will be changed in the future to provide a little additional more funding from the state to the district. A couple other things that were in the state budget. They had a set aside for high impact tutoring, which of our foundation aid increase, they set aside $3.5 million that the district had to spend toward high impact tutoring. The legislative proposal took that out, so right now that's in discussion. As a school district, we provide a lot of additional supports for tutoring, whether it's AIS during the school day or after-school tutoring. We have other funding that we've set aside for that, so we've requested that that set aside be taken out and allow the district to utilize those funds based upon our needs. There's also $20 million that's going to be set aside for the new early college high school and pathways in technology. We feel this is a great time for those funds to support the district as we move forward with the development and the implementation of the STEAM high school in the next coming years. There's no change to expense-driven aid formulas, and they're going to continue the community schools foundation aid set aside, and there's also going to be an increase in universal pre-kindergarten aid, so we can continue to enroll those students, 3- and 4-year-olds, in our pre-K programs and try to get parents and families involved in our schools at that younger age so they're prepared at the kindergarten level. Now that we know that what the state aid is going to look like, we looked into our revenue assumptions. The district is not planning to use any of our fund balance. We are going to request an equitable change in the tax levy. It's around $150 million at this point.
Yeah. We're very jealous.
Yeah, we are.
There's a slight decrease in the pilot revenue. We anticipate sales tax collections. In the governor's executive state aid, it includes $42.5 million increase, which includes our Chapter 1 accrual, and our federal revenue increase of $300,000 due to increased Medicaid reimbursement services. A couple of the revenues that are going to be decreasing, we're going to be looking at lower interfund revenue corresponding to the end of some of our stimulus funds ending. This is going to be partially offset by higher interest earnings due to higher rates of return, and the additional $500,000 from the city for our facilities projects not funded through JSCB. So looking at our total revenue, including the looking at the state aid portion of our revenue, our foundation aid is going to increase to $362.9 million, which is $38.7 million, 12% increase. Transportation aid is going to increase $2.8 million, which is 16%. Building aid, there's a slight decrease of about 1%, and all our other aid, which is special service aid, high cost excess aid, private excess cost aid, and charter school transition, that will increase about $1.2 million. So looking at our total state aid coming in for the next year, it's going to be $442.5 million, which is a $42.5 million increase, which is about 11%. Once we have our state aid in place, we look at all our other revenue. Our property tax request is to increase the 1% of the 2% increase that the city is moving forward with, which is a $7.1 million change, which is about 10.4%. Sales tax stays level. Our federal funds will increase slightly, about $300,000, and all our other revenue will decrease about $2.2 million. So our total budget request for the next school year is $528.5 million, with a $47.7 million change, which equates to about 9.9%. Now, I mentioned the property tax increase. So as discussions that the Board of Education has had regarding that 1% increase, as you can see from the chart that I prepared for you, if you look at the fourth column, the school tax rate per 1,000, in 2014-15, it was $17.35 per 1,000. And the proposal moving forward this coming year will reduce that down to 15.45, which is a 10.9% decrease for the school district. At the same time, if you look at the city's proposal in 2014-2015, it was 9.26 per 1,000. That is going to increase to 12.24, which is a 32.2% increase. Based upon discussions with the Board of Education, looking at these figures, you can see that the proposed decrease this year for the school district from 22-23 to 23-24 is 8.55%, while the city's proposed tax increase is about 2%. And that's why we've made this request. As you look at the next chart, you can see how this comparable slide of revenue over the past 10 years with the current proposal with a tax rate per 1,000 included in the line that goes through there. Over the last 10 years, the school district tax levy has increased $3.6 million, or 5.6%. That equates to about 0.5% per year on average. Based upon this latest proposal for 24-25, the city tax revenue is projected to increase by $19.5 million, or 57.5%, which equates to about 5.75% on year on average. With the looming funding cliff and our projected 5-year forecast moving forward, we're analyzing our expenses, but the board also has a recommendation that we also look at our revenues and the equitable distribution of funding from the tax levy. We know that things are going to be changing after our federal stimulus funding ends, and we wanted to make this this point to the Common Council that we will be addressing this in 2 ways. One is we're going to be looking at our expenditures, and the other one is we need to look at our revenues. We brought in a consultant that met with the Board of Education about a week and a half ago, presented a 5-year forecast of where we're going to be, and based upon that forecast, after 5 years, we will have depleted our fund balance if all things stay equal. So we know know that we need to make some adjustments, and we're planning on spending this next year looking at that while we're maximizing our federal funds that we have. We're doing a number of things with our federal funds to build capacity, and some of those things I'll talk about as I get to our expenditure side.
I'll stop you for a second. I mean, one of the things that I think, for me in the community, I always run into challenges with is people have a mistaken assumption that we set the tax rate, but the city sets the levy, right? And then the assessment is determined independently by the assessment commissioner. And I worry that when people think the rate goes down, it's because the council's setting the rate. And I think that's just something I would want to kind of clarify. And then the other thing I would just say here too is I think there's been a lot of talk about the city's, the assessment and the rate, but there isn't a chart here on state aid, and I know state aim aid has been flat for the city. And I think that's
decades.
I think it's just a key, really key context here as we move forward in the discussion. So, thanks.
Understood. So as we talk about our expenses, these are the key points that we made when we were looking at our expenses and what drove our decision-making process. We want to continue to invest in our future. We want to provide high-quality academics. We want to ensure safe and secure learning environments. We want to recruit and retain exceptional staff. We want to engage and involve the community, and we want to plan and prepare for funding changes. As we did that, these are kind of the areas where we focused. Salaries, including additional positions, position shifts from federal stimulus grants, contract settlements, and estimates for unsettled contracts. Currently in this budget, there are 70 FTEs that are shifting from our federal cursive funds that are ending September 30th, and they're going to be moving on to our general fund budget. We've also settled all of our contracts but one at this time, so our goal is to make sure that all of our contracts are settled and we have a good idea and a good plan of our expenditures moving forward, because those contracts really set the cost in place for a number of years so we can plan and budget appropriately. We're looking to increase salaries for our lowest wage earners to improve recruitment and retention. We have a number of lower salaried staff positions in the district where we're finding it difficult to not only hire them but also to retain them based upon the wage and the comparable salaries that those positions are being hired in our surrounding school districts. Pension rates, we're looking at TRS to go down slightly to 9.76%, and ERS is going to go up 2%. We're looking at a healthcare increase of $4.2 million, partially for the new positions that we're adding on this, and also offset by reduced claim projections from our actuaries. Workers' compensation is looking at be flat year over year, and there's an unemployment increase of about $500,000 based on the unemployment tax holiday. Further assumptions that we made: we need to maintain funds for PPE and purifiers and filters and sanitizers, because we still want to make sure our schools are safe and our staff are safe. There's increased cost estimates for vehicles, building materials, papers, and supplies. We all know that everything costs a little bit more today than it did 3 years ago, and we're also dealing still with some of those supply chain issues. We want to maintain transportation for grades K through 8 at 1 mile and grades 9 through 12 at 1.5 miles. And there's a charter tuition rate increase of 2.5% for general education and 5% for special education, because there's still a number of students still flowing into our charter schools.
So when you say that there's a number of students flowing, because the last count I think you were at 22,000 students, right?
20.
The school district total number of students?
Yes.
It's about, I believe,
I'm not sure how long ago you're speaking to, but if you're talking about last year, we were probably closer to about 20,000. So right now it's about 19.5, 19.6.
Okay, so because
Yeah.
the year before was 22, so you're down students.
Yes, we're down students, but one of the things I definitely was going to make as a point was our student needs are much higher. the root causes of many of the things our students have dealt with from the pandemic and all of that has caused, as you know, throughout the city, what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the same issues in schools as part of that continuation of behaviors. So their needs are much higher, so our mental health costs are going to be a lot larger than they have been in the past.
Offset by the county?
We're working with the county. We're absolutely doing that, but we're also seeing extended cost.
Can I ask about the maintaining funding for personal protective equipment? I know New York State has declared the pandemic over, right? So what are we still purchasing in order to keep folks safe?
Well, there's still the sanitizers. We purchased air filters for all of our classrooms, and they require a new filter to be replaced. So those are an expense that we still are going to be carrying on for a while to make sure our staff feel comfortable in the classroom. You know, we're still seeing people coming down with COVID, and we still want to make sure that our staff feel safe when they're in the classroom. Also, going back to the point, there are 2,441 students that are in the charter schools that don't show up as part of our 19,500 students.
Right,
So,
but the number was 22 that showed up in the school district, not the charter schools.
I don't know what year you're looking at. It's been a couple of years since we were up at 22.
Pandemic, now you're down to 19.
So. At the end of our expense assumptions, we're looking at also contract service increases of $3.35 million. The district is taking this opportunity to switch our ERP licensing, and it's the Enterprise Resource Planning System, so we're currently using PeopleSoft. There's a finite deadline when PeopleSoft is really going to transition over. They're starting to go over toward the cloud, so we're looking at implementing a new system and transition over to that in the next year and a half. We're also looking at developing a new strategic plan. We're currently working on the strategic plan based upon the last superintendent. So Superintendent Davis is going to be moving forward with developing a new strategic plan. We're going to be looking at our enrollment and student needs. As we said, and I mentioned that it was moved forward to after this year, we're going to have to start looking at our class sizes. We're going to have to start looking at some of the things that we're doing in our buildings and prepare for this decrease of stimulus funds over the next year. So finally, I'm just going to give you what you see as an overview of our adopted budget. Again, some of these salaries and wage changes are because of some of the staff that have shifted over from our stimulus funding. Our benefits have increased about 7.6%. Contract services have increased $12.3 million. But again, our intent is these are capacity building expenses, and we will not see these types of expenses on our budget next year. So these are going to be kind of one-time only things that we're taking advantage of this year. Charter school tuition has gone up 11%. The interfund has gone up $2.2 million, partially to the $500,000 that's going to go toward our capital construction projects, and there's a 3% increase in our supplies and other expenditures.
Do you have a number for the amount the PPE measures cost?
Not off the top of my head, no. Are you looking for previous expenditures or what our future expenditures are going to be?
Let's tell them how much it cost and how much it's continuing to cost to maintain them.
We can get that for you.
That'd be great, thanks.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Hello? Oh, yeah. You know I'm much louder than that. So, laughing at me? Yo. Okay. All right. So, I'm just curious, the 2,441 charter school students, that is, tell me a little bit about that in the budget.
So we're required to provide our funding that goes directly over to the charter school per student. So that's where a large expense goes. So pretty much any dollar that would come to the school district for a student that then goes to the charter school, we more or less just take those dollars and we give those to the charter school.
We provide their tuition and transportation, right?
Yes.
What you also need to know about that piece, though, is that by a certain date, if that student is returned to our district, they do not have to return the funds. That's part of the legislation that we've been lobbying to change, because they get to keep the funds and we get the students back. So we incur that cost.
How often does that happen? What's the percentage?
Quite often. Quite a few students are returned to the district.
So say they enroll in August or September, they make it through the first quarter. If they don't, the charter school can come back, then you guys are responsible for them for the rest of the year?
Yes.
And that's a what?
But the
state?
funding is not returned.
But that's a state thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So if they're a freshman and they attend a charter school for a month, like Counselor said, and they come back to you, you don't get those funds back for the next 3 years of their education?
No.
Just for that school
The
year?
current year, yeah.
That school year, and it would be probably more than a month.
Okay.
So,
Is the reverse true or the same, in that if you have a city school district student that transfers to a charter school mid-year, do you retain your funding for
No,
that
we-
student?
we have to pay.
That transfers with?
yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned, and I just want to make sure I understood correctly, that once the state aid formula is fully implemented for this 1 year that we're talking about, you will be fully funded.
Yes, ma'am. The only increase that they project would be any CPI increase until they get to the point of looking at the funding formula and making an adjustment to that.
Okay.
We're hoping to have representation on that committee, because we feel as though our environment requires us to be able to sit at the table and say many of the things that we're dealing with in our neighborhoods and our environment. So we feel if we're at the table, we can be a lot stronger.
Absolutely, we'll be glad to be there.
I was just wondering, I'm a little, we've been studying this book, and the school board did adopt what's in our book here as far as the budget goes. So this is the second go-around, right?
Yes, we did a
So
proposed budget, and now this is the adopted.
The precipitation of that was because you looked at our budget and you figured, you could use another $9 million. Is that the idea here, basically? I mean, was there a program that you really wanted to fund or something, or?
I think you all know that education is a people business. What we're having a really hard time with is retaining staff and attracting staff. So by doing that, what we're trying to do is make sure that, one, we're able to be on par with other districts as far as what we're paying our folks. And right now, we have not been able to do that. So it's going to be an upfront cost. It's going to cost quite a bit. So we understand moving forward some of the aids that is going away. And by knowing what's coming, we're saying if we start this process now, we'll be able to level out and support.
And Superintendent, of course, I'm sure you and your chief financial officer knows that this city of Syracuse faces a structural deficit every year, $21 million, I figure it is. And, while you're siloed in education, trying to provide the best for your students and pay for your teachers and everything else, we have to worry about paying for everything else. We have to worry about for policemen and public works and transportation and the fire department too. So, I mean, this is something that's a burden on all of us. And, I look around here, and a lot of us are city high school graduates here too.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to be on the first joint school construction board, where the city and the Board of Education, and the school district, we all joined together to build all those new schools. And at that time, that was sort of a precedent that had only been done once before, that financial vehicle. Only once before. It didn't work out too well in Buffalo, but we made it work here. And so I'm a little, let's say, miffed that you adopt one budget, and then you come to us with another budget. It's sort of like three-car Monte almost, I'm just wondering why we're doing this when we know what we both face. You want to educate your kids, and we want to keep the city running. And it's something that's a burden on us. So, like I said, this is something in my long tenure with the city I haven't seen before.
I just want to follow up a little bit on that question. So out of the second budget the additional $7 million, that's all for salary increases, or that would all be allocated to salary increases?
And retain that.
And so the initial budget, did you plan to use any from fund balance out of the 150 for that?
No, our original budget did not include fund balance or the additional increase in the tax levy rate. We were not made aware that there was going to be a rate increase to the tax levy until after our budget was put together. And once the Board of Education was made aware that there was going to be a rate increase, they requested that school district receive some of that increase.
Yeah, there's not a rate increase yet because we haven't passed the budget.
Right.
We're deciding on the levy, and that'll determine what the rate is.
Understood.
So,
How many people work for the city school district? How many? 4,000?
Yeah.
How many more are city residents?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's,
how many city residents?
Yes.
Scott, do you know how many city residents? We could get that information for you. I don't have that on hand. There's about 4,400 current employees, including some, part-time employees and those types of things.
that's up from years previous, right?
Yes.
Okay. And
One more thing, sorry, Madam President. What's the average salary of a teacher? Does it vary or the pace of?
The starting salary would be about 51,000. That's a master's degree step one. Average is probably in the low 60s.
Okay.
All righty. Okay, I'm sitting here listening, I'm sitting here looking at that, and I appreciate everything that you guys do for the students and for the city, and I hear you, Superintendent. The same deficits that you say you're facing, we're facing as well. And I think that it's beholden upon us to be able to pick up the trash and to plow the streets so your kids can get to school. And not even to mention, the school district has a $560 million budget. The city of Syracuse operates on $310 to cover the whole city for each and every one of us sitting in this chamber. So yeah, I'm with Councilor Hogan because I'm trying to understand this, because I'm trying to figure out how do we overcome we didn't just look at raising taxes because we want to be flush with money. That's not the case. It's going to keep our services running that everybody in this room participates in. And if we're going to come together and start drawing lines in the sand, let's draw some lines. I sit on JSCB. You get our engineers, you get our architects, you get our city staff. We don't charge a dime, okay? So I think that it's beholden upon us to work together as a team to continue to keep the school district and the city operating.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, also speaking on runnings, and remember, if I can, correct me if I'm wrong, please, on the recent years of being hacked with the school district. Does the budget include anything with cybersecurity capabilities and all those things? Have those things been addressed, especially with the external audits that have happened?
Mm-hmm.
Are they in the? Yes, we have a fully funded IT staff that does that for us.
Okay. All right.
New York State had some kind of cyber security funding or support for that, right? Because I know the city municipality has their own, and then I think the school district and police were separate.
I can't speak to that. That would be our.
Municipal governments is 5,
Right.
once the city is 1, school districts are not included in that.
But they had some mandate from the state about cybersecurity and what they needed to do to keep up. All right, I'll look it up. I'll follow up.
So, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So a few years ago, the city was under the Financial Restructuring Board, and we got a comprehensive review report from the state. And I know that one of the recommendations was further collaboration with back office functions for the school district and the city. And I'm just kind of curious, what's the current state in terms of collaboration with finance functions, things like that? How are you guys able to work together, and how does that relationship work right now?
Yeah, we worked through the Onondaga County with all of our purchasing, so that is a savings for us. That is a project that's been in place for a number of years. We also partnered with the JSCB School Board with those initiatives, with the renovations of our school buildings. So that is a really good collaboration that we're working on. I am new to this position. I just started in November. So hopefully I will have some more time to work with Commissioner Rudd and Commissioner O'Connor on some of the other collaboration, Commissioner O'Connor on some of the other collaboration things that we can look forward to.
So you cite this actually in this little handout that I just got today, right? Correct? That Yonkers did it.
Tim provided that.
Well, Tim gave it to me.
Yes, sir.
I thought maybe I was, geez, I said, this is great. He's already thought of it. Tim thought of it.
Yeah.
So is this something you would consider then, right?
This is the first I've seen this.
Okay. Well,
I have not had a chance to review this at all.
Tim, can you come up and just put a few things on the record for me? Yes. How much is our fund balance? City.
A little over 100.
And what is our gap this year?
21 million.
How are we closing the gap?
17 million fund balance, 4 million ARPA.
Okay, thank you.
And ARPA goes away, of course, after this year, right? Correct?
Yeah, there won't be any more.
So
we had 20. We had 17 of ARPA last year, so we reduced. We're kind of weaning off of ARPA.
So I would like to say, you can stay up here, because I just want to say this. Y'all know I think the school, I am a Nottingham graduate, and I say it all the time. I love Syracuse City School. I love what you guys are doing. I love the creativity. I love the collaboration. I love what you guys do. I really mean that as a family, right? I want to say I was at one of the board meetings, because I like to come here, right? Y'all know I'm a advocate as well as my counterparts here of youth and families, and we got to continue to build on that and making sure our kids have a better future. But I also know that I heard board members at the meeting discuss they want this extra money in it because of the tax levy, and I just have to emphasize it because I want to let people know where we stand, and I hope I'm speaking up for that. We want the best for the school district. We want the schools to reach the sky because this is our future. We have to plant the seed. But we are also the mother of the city, right? So if the mother can't feed their children, we can't grow. So we have to continue to build on each other. Police, fire, school district, we have to come together as a family, as one. We have to support each other. We have to know what's going on. And it's not about one getting the other, because if one fall, we all fall. So we always just have to remember that as we build together, because the goal is to make sure that the Syracuse continues to build, whether it's school district or whatever department, because it's for our kids, right? It's for the future. But if one fall, they all fall. So we always have to remember that when you're looking at it, and I know your job is to fight, and I know your job is to advocate, right? Because that's what the constituents brought you into. But then you have to also look at the bigger picture and say, how does this affect everyone? If we can't do this, then this doesn't happen. So I just want to say that out loud so that everyone knows, because I had a chance to be at the meeting, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm like, who's saying what, right? And I started asking questions, because it's important to ask questions. And I came back to, what are we doing? What's going on? How can we better help the school district? What needs to happen? And then, he explains the budget in another way, like, listen, Rashida, we can't do this because it affects this. So I just want you guys to know that. And then also the average, DPW workers are like one of our lowest paid people. They make less than they make $21 an hour, the guys that pick up your trash. Some of them starting off at 15 and 16. Mm-hmm. So just so you know, like, what's going on in the city, and maybe come to some of our meetings so you know, like, how things are going. And it's not like intentionally we're going after we don't want to give the schools. We want to give the schools, we want to give DPW, we want to give the fire, we want to give all our departments, our codes, everyone, more money if we have it, but you can't get something that we haven't got. So I just wanted to say that, and I didn't know. Thank you.
To add, not to add because that was a lot. We all understand the importance of educating our children. This is the building block of our community. We get that. But this year, you have a fully funded budget while we're navigating a shortfall of $21 million. So it's going to be hard to transfer.
Understood.
And I think we'd be remiss to talk about the 2%. This is not an easy lift for us either.
Right.
2%.
Right.
I represent some pretty challenged neighborhoods and a lot of senior citizens, a lot of people on fixed income. This 2% is, they don't realize it yet, but we'll be all getting calls about it. Right. We haven't voted on it. Right. So this is something that we don't take lightly. The 2%. So.
And then I want to piggyback. We talked about retention. We can't hire half of the city. We can't hire anybody because we can't retain people. Because you know why? Our pay scale is not comparable to anybody in our surrounding areas. So it's not like we're sitting here flushed with all of this money. We're trying to actually keep our city together, because I was here along with Councilor Hogan when 7 years ago, we were looking at a control board from the state. So if we go on the control board, guess what? Everybody gonna pay the price for that.
Tim, what we're using, Director Rod.
There was a question about the process and the way the school district and the city work, and I do think one thing that's not really highlighted here is when the capital process, which we need to collaborate more on, the district, we own the buildings, they have to have JSCB to keep the debt in a separate entity, and there's projects that aren't on JSCB that need to happen. This budget, when we give them $500,000, we're also giving them essentially $25 million in our bonding authority for them to conduct other projects, and that feels like a major increase and opportunity that in the end becomes 98% reimbursed, so it's stuff we should be doing. Yep. And that's the early engagement in the capital planning. We heard it, and then we saw an opportunity to give money in that vein here, and that's there. But I don't think it's ever good to be asking for money when just to ask for it. Even we don't have too many asks that aren't really necessary, but to have the ask change over 6 weeks feels frustrating, and I would say that shouldn't be a practice in the future, and the ask should be considered up front so it can be considered appropriately, because we do have constraints on the way we can raise revenue, and the way our revenue can go up and then go down if something happens, if there's taxpayers are upset about the increase. We can never decrease your funding, and the rate is just a function of a bunch of other stuff. So to focus on a rate going down when we literally by law can't ever give you $1 less feels hard. But at the same time, we understand the need to have additional resources. And I think we're actually really thankful that the state did come through with all the foundation aid stuff so that you are properly funded. And that makes it such that I've been telling everybody we're flying on a plane with a child and we have to put our mask on first. And I do think the state gave us the opportunity to be able to focus on putting our mask on this year, and then, like Councilor Caldwell was saying, we have more opportunities to properly be parents of the city together, so to speak.
So, Mayor, I just want to make sure that I say, fortunately, a lot of our board members are here, so they're hearing the conversation. And the reason I think that's important is because we know what's coming. We know there's going to be some financial difficulties coming for this district, and our students in our city are going to be relying upon the education our kids get. So however we work together, we're going to have to figure that out. Mm-hmm. If this process doesn't feel well, then let's talk about how we can improve that. Yep. But the ask is there, and we know it's going to need it in the future, as well as, there's things that we can do now, but maybe if we prepare differently, it won't feel so adversarial, because that's not the intent. The intent is finding the need, making sure we got the right people in the right places to do the job that we know they need to do to secure our future. So that's really what this is about.
Absolutely. And I thank you for that comment, because I know I immediately left the meeting because I'm telling you, I was like, what are they talking about? I went to Tim and I said, Tim, what's going on? Why are we not aiding school? Explain to me a little bit more, right? And it's important that we have those conversations and we talk and build, because that's only how our city is going to continue to build. And we're, like I said, a family. It has to be that like, I got to be able to say, listen, this is what we needed. We're going to be in a deficit, and this is what we need. Until we have those relationships, we're going to be in trouble. So we have to continue to build together, not separate, together. So I say, I appreciate that, Superintendent. That was great.
You wanted to say something?
So, Superintendent, now that we're clear on that, can you please tell us a little bit about the programs and what are you implementing to address the mental health situation among our children, and how is that impacting your budget?
We're doing a number of things to address mental health in the schools. One of them is we're developing programs where we're going into colleges for those students who are in those mental health careers, and trying to get them early before they even graduate so that we can give them opportunities to come to our district and we can secure them, because it's difficult to find those mental health professionals that can help in our buildings. So it's hard to hire them. So we're actually going to find them early, even before they graduate, so that we can work with them and get them into an urban setting so they have an idea of what the job really is, and train them the right way so that they can actually help our students and families.
So the ratio of professional to students would be an increase in future years?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And as of right now, to be honest with you, it's needed. And it's not just students that are suffering. We have a lot of adults in crisis as well. So we're trying to figure out how to support them also. So when we talk about mental health supports, don't just think kids. Because it's got to be a healthy environment for all of us to move forward, and that's what we're dealing with.
And then, mental health comes in different ways. I mean, there's many levels of, so we're addressing all of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So on that note, I'm glad to hear that you're going into the colleges trying to get professionals before they enter the market. When do you start the hiring for the following school year? Like what month?
The hiring season really should start somewhere around February, late February, early March, because that's considered the hiring season. What happens is the longer you wait, more people are already taken up, because a lot of districts are hiring during that time. So the earlier the better.
So are you on par with the other school districts in the area?
We're closer now, because we started earlier. So we started early March, so we are closer to what other school districts are.
Changed it, that's great.
Yes, we did get ahead of the game a little bit.
A couple students that were interns or student teachers, and they really wanted to work in the school district. They put their application in, and they didn't hear. They said, we won't give you a decision until later. So they went to a suburban district because they were quicker. So.
But I also have to caution people, it's not apples to apples, because so many suburban districts aren't hiring that many folks, so they can do that earlier, whereas we have the domino effect. As people take new positions, other positions open up, so you can't really advertise for them until that happens. So it's really a number of things that happen when you're dealing with large sums of staff. A little bit of a different process. Right, and retirees is another one. But the earlier we start, the better.
Right, that's great.
It's the bottom line.
So with a reduced number of students as of now, which may change for next year or so, do you, I don't know if you said it at the beginning of the meeting, but then do you have less, the classrooms, are they, it's not that big of a difference, but how is it impacting?
It's not a direct effect that way, because the balance don't work. Like, you don't lose 500 kids from a building or a classroom.
Right.
They're spread out throughout the place. So you might go from 31 to 29 in this class and that class, because we have so many. So you won't see a direct effect with staffing versus the number of students that we have.
Yeah. What is the level of grant writing that the school district does?
You can answer that a lot better than me. Level grant writing.
Grant writings.
We're averaging about $80 million a year That was my previous position as Director of Special Programs in the district. So we have about 75 to 80 different grants, from something to $500 to Title I is about $19 million. So it's averaging about $80 million a year in grants. And we go for every one we possibly can try to get.
Okay. And also, is there any other money that is raised annually with the school district outside of grants, or just
Foundations or anything?
Well, that's pretty much the foundation of our budget with our grants and our general fund. There's other donations that come in, but a lot of times those are for specific purposes. Somebody's going to donate $1,000 to this school for this purpose, and those are set aside for those specific purposes.
How are we doing with translators and help with our New Americans?
Ongoing work. The department is just underwent new leadership. I mean, it's just developed new leadership. So we're excited about the opportunity to do some things because we're getting more and more new Americans and folks who need those services. So, and again, a lot of things that I'm talking about aren't just students. We have to support families as well, because the communication has to be there. So we're looking at those pieces and how to support better. Yeah.
Just to follow up too, and goes along with the grant, we received a grant that's going to fund us to create a welcome center, which is going to be for students and families. So we're in the process of implementing that, this starting part of that initiative.
And that'll have translation?
Yes, it'll.
72 dialects or more at this point?
I believe it's more than that, 80.
Languages.
This is great.
Yeah. And actually the Welcome Center will be a lot more than just language. It will provide many other services to the families in general. So yeah, that's a good program.
Well, I would say I think this meeting was really good. I think we talked a lot. We got some stuff going, and I mean, I think we're great, right?
And then what we'll do is we'll have a committee meeting where we can then start that conversation of how do we mother the Syracuse city together.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, school board out there. Thank you, school board.